Try that again. And he has indicated that he won't be able to make it tonight. He asked me to step in as chair, so I will do so unless there is objection. Okay. Then it is 6:01, and I will call this meeting of the Community Development Committee to order. It is Monday, May 5th. And the first thing we're going to do is note the attendance, that there is myself, Councilmember Watton, City Administrator, and the Mayor, and City Attorney, and Community Development Director in attendance as well.
Clerk Dean.
Oh, yes, and Clerk Dean.
And Parks and Public Works.
Oh, and Parks and Public Works Director. Wow, we've got a full house tonight. All right. Okay, let's see. Next thing is the agenda approval. Were there any concerns with the agenda or requested revisions? Okay.
No.
Then without objection, we will adopt the agenda as presented. That takes us to public comment. And apart from staff who are members of the public who are welcome to make said public comment, we don't have anyone else in chambers. And I don't see any staff stepping forward to make public comment either, as is their right. So we'll go and close public comment, and that takes us to the minutes. And I didn't notice anything that I wanted to change. Councilmember Watton?
I approve.
All right.
Minutes as presented.
Then we will consider the minutes approved as presented. And that takes us to agenda bills. Where we have two tonight that are very closely related to each other. The first is AB 25-035, ordinance amending the Snoqualmie Municipal Code 17.20, retail use requirements in downtown historic district retail overlay zone. And who's going to begin tonight with us? All right. Thank you.
I'm going to have a standing desk tonight.
Excellent.
Good evening, council members, committee members, Mayor, Mike, everybody. So tonight we're bringing back the agenda item for the retail use. And as you may recall in the, I'm Mona Davis, your
yes.
community development director.
So recognized.
Tonight we're bringing back the we had a discussion at our last meeting, which was on April 21st, to talk about the retail overlay. And so we've provided some additional materials for you to look at to determine alternatives and to provide staff directions so that we can get this ready for hopefully for the council packet next week. And so Andrew Levins is here again. He's prepared some additional maps. And so I'm going to turn it over to Andrew. Andrew, if you want to talk through where we left off last week and the additional materials that you prepared for tonight's meeting, we can hopefully just have a discussion about it.
Yeah, thank you, Director Davis. My name is Andrew Levins. I'm a land use planning consultant helping the city process these amendments. I will go ahead and share my screen. Just to give a refresher on kind of what we're talking about, the two agenda bills that we're discussing tonight are closely related. The first is to modify retail use requirements in downtown Snoqualmie in a distinct geographic area within the city to require all storefronts facing Falls Avenue or select parcels Railroad Avenue or select parcels along Falls Avenue to require that a minimum of 90% of those storefronts consist of retail uses as defined in the code. And then on Center Boulevard, a similar 90% retail use requirement would apply for storefronts that are in the ridge facing Center Boulevard southeast. This proposal would also remove the retail waiver process from this requirement, so no non-retail uses could go in unless this 90% retail, 10% non-retail use threshold was met. So since our last meeting, 2 weeks ago, we prepared, based on the discussion of the committee, we prepared with the help of Public Works a number of exhibits for the committee's discussion that were either based on specific scenarios that the committee identified or scenarios that staff has also discussed internally and considered. And this section here kind of, it discusses the purpose, or I guess the concept behind each of the various alternatives. And we also added a staff recommendation to this report, just trying to provide, I guess, our perspective. So I'll just go ahead and start by walking through the various amendments, or I'm sorry, the various boundary alternatives. So the first is the Planning Commission's January 21st recommendation that they made to the CD committee. This includes parcels along Falls Avenue, including 4 parcels that are currently being used as residences. Staff is recommending that the committee move forward with this alternative for the extent of the amendments downtown, because in our view, these homes, these residences are already considered non-conforming uses because they are residential ground floor uses that are occurring in the business retail 2 zone. So the inclusion of these residential parcels in the amendments does not affect the ability of the use, the residential use, and these parcels can continue to be used indefinitely under the non-conforming use code as residences. So in our view, it makes the most sense to remain consistent with the Planning Commission's recommendation, especially given the proximity to the kind of downtown retail core.
So in general, I entirely agree. There's one issue that came up on Planning Commission that was the reason for the ultimate exclusion of those 4. And I think that there was still some misunderstanding there, and perhaps here as well from some of us, is if those properties were sold to someone else, would they then be able to continue to be used as residences by the people who then buy them? Or would they be forced to then become commercial and et cetera? That was the hangup.
So my understanding of the non-conforming use code, and we can confirm this, but we've done a little bit of research on it, and the parcels could continue to be used as residences indefinitely. They can switch ownership as long as the use as a residence continues, and I believe the period, as long as it doesn't fall out of residential use, which I believe the code defines that as a period of like 1 year. It could be 2. In that case, when the building or the home became occupied, it would need to become a retail use at that time. What I would point out is that that is currently the scenario that will apply to those residences, whether or not they are included in this retail overlay. So because they are already considered non-conforming uses, these amendments actually don't affect the ability to like buy or sell or continue to use those homes as residences.
And then City Attorney, you're gonna add something?
Oh, I just wanted it's section 17.55.040 of Snoqualmie's code. Under section C3, if it stops for 24 months,
Okay.
then it has to remain.
But that's irrespective of whether it's sold to a new owner.
That's correct.
Okay, so that was the main concern that I heard from residents when they came to talk to the Planning Commission, was about that issue of if they sold it, then what?
Right.
Okay, thank you.
And it's
In
definitely
that case, I would be fine with it to be as is, but we'll of course have discussion. It's not my sole decision. Let's go ahead and stick with this topic. Did you have anything else to add, Andrew? Yeah.
No, if you'd like to continue discussing,
Yeah, I wanted
happy
to turn, Councilmember Watt and see what your thought was then.
Just to make it easy, Director Davis and I talked momentarily. And as long as the highest and best use for whomever the property owner is, that is consistent, I think that this, satisfies my concerns.
Excellent.
So just to clarify, Andrew, it's my understanding too that if the house were to go up for sale and somebody purchased it and wanted to continue, using that house as a residence, that would be okay. If they wanted to expand the house, build a second story, anything like that, then they would be required to put retail on the bottom, residential above. Is that your understanding?
that's not entire. It's a little nuanced. So there are certain development triggers that would require that. The non-conforming use code does allow certain expansions and modifications to be made to a structure up to a point, and you can continue using it as a. It could continue to be used as a home if it was expanded, as long as it was done so consistent with the non-conforming use code. If the homeowner wanted to expand the structure beyond what is allowed, and I believe I don't know, I don't have that in front of me. It is a relatively limited, uh, like relatively limited expansions are allowed, but if it's a substantial expansion, then they would need to then um, modify the use of the parcel such that the ground floor was not used as residences.
If I'm not mistaken, that might be the case even as it is.
That's correct.
Because they're in the floodplain / floodway, right?
Well, it's the case as it is because of that, but also because they're already considered non-conforming uses under in a retail zone. So there are residential uses on the ground floor in an existing retail zone. So if the homeowner wanted to expand that parcel now or expand that home right now without the adoption of these retail use overlay amendments, they would still need to comply to the non-conforming use code. Really, the only way the amendments we're talking about tonight apply to the property is in the event that that home does end up falling out of residential use for a period of 24 months. And then they would now need to comply with the requirements of the zone. So they couldn't use it as a home on the ground floor anymore. In the event that happened, now they would be, now these amendments that we're talking about would apply. But if we don't adopt, if they're not included in these amendments, they would still be required to put a retail use in on the ground floor in that scenario. However, it would not be subject to the 90% retail, 10% non-retail use requirements. Hopefully that's not making it more confusing.
No,
Does that help at all?
Yeah, thank you very much. Okay.
Okay, so,
Direction for staff on that, it sounds like what we could probably move forward with is the option as it appears.
as the planning commission recommended, without the notch.
Right.
Okay, perfect. Okay, Andrew, do you want to move on to Center Boulevard?
Yeah. So here we have attachment 3 in the memo, and this reflects the black lines reflect the current extent of where the retail use requirements apply. The orange polygon is where it represents the Planning Commission's recommendation. So all storefronts facing Center Boulevard would be subject to these requirements. In discussing this internally with the city manager and the director, there was some consideration given to the idea that these requirements could be expanded as shown in attachment 4 and 5 to the memo. So in those scenarios, the retail use requirement would be expanded to apply to the Dollar Tree and Starbucks commercial building that's not facing Center Boulevard. That is to the east of kind of the Center Boulevard promenade. And then a alternate boundary that would potentially apply retail use requirements to the commercial development that's south of Snoqualmie Parkway, in addition to Center Boulevard and the eastern commercial building, to the commercial development housing the gas station, the Safeway. I believe there's the Bartels and a few other commercial uses in this area.
Mhm.
So I would want to open that up to discussion with the committee, and then also if there's anybody else from the city who wants to discuss this.
Andrew, can you remind us, the reason that we started with this exercise on Center was because we wanted to keep the retail in the walkable area of Center Boulevard, correct?
Yeah, we initially, the planning commission was focused mostly on preserving the walkable retail districts in Snoqualmie. And so along Center Boulevard, the types having a more, the thought process was having a more restrictive set of use requirements for the walkable storefronts makes sense. However, when you consider expanding it to apply to some of these other buildings, it starts, it may not, it would require a more, we would need to go back and take another look at how we could apply these requirements, I think, because as written, many of the businesses that are in here that may be desirable businesses, such as the gas station or drive-through fast food uses, they currently would not count towards the 90% use requirement under the current definition of retail use in the code. They would count towards the 10% non-retail use, because it is basically only pedestrian oriented retail uses that are currently identified in the definition that the 90% use requirement applies. So that was, I think, the thinking behind limiting it to Center Boulevard Southeast.
All right, so we'll go to Councilmember Watton and then City Administrator.
My first question is this, and it's kind of elementary, and that's, we're counting doors. We're not counting square footage as part of the 90%, right, in the definition. Because if we just focus on Center Boulevard, all those spaces are relatively similar in size. You start looking at Safeway or for the Dollar Tree, they're massive. And so that may change some things. And remind me again, too, in retail, does that include financial institutions?
On the ridge, it does include banks,
Okay.
but downtown,
does
it does not. That is the one distinction between the two definitions.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I'll just add that, yeah, it does seem kind of like where if we expanded this, that's kind of comparing apples and oranges in some ways with these larger spaces. City Administrator.
So this is my fault. Director Davis and I have talked about this, and we actually wanted to pull the third one out. So we'll deal with Safeway another way. I don't know what our decision was on the Dollar Tree. It's been a long day. But the main reason is that our retail up there is not protected. Safeway could close tomorrow and a church could move into that location. Not only do you lose the sales tax, but you also lose property taxes in those scenarios. That obviously is the most nightmare scenario that I can come up with. We both feel that maybe looking at adjusting the zoning code to maybe restrict that so that doesn't happen in that area, it would be a better choice than this method for the Safeway area. I don't know about the Dollar Tree. I'll let you talk to that.
Well, real quick on that is my understanding is that the next agenda bill is what essentially begins the process of opening up the ridge to zoning and ultimately having these kinds of different paths where if we don't take especially that second action, then none of this happens, at least on the ridge. So I agree, there could be other methods to address that type of retail space. It's different from the intent of the process that we've been going through over the last, 3.5 years since I've been on council, that's been focusing on the walkable retail. Yes, Director, you have something to add?
Yeah, so I understand the walkable retail down center. Adding in the Dollar Tree behind there, I think you could argue that that is still part of the walkable area since there is a pathway that gets you there. And many people cut through there to get to Starbucks and then, walk up there is a sidewalk kind of roadway in there that takes you back onto center. So that one I feel like could go either way, though I think ultimately we need to look at our entire zoning map up on the ridge and look at all of our mixed use zoning and look at what's the built environment and revisit all of that.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, it's a big beige blob.
Yeah.
And the business park is blue, which I'm not sure how the Safeway jives with being in a business park, since that's really more of a retail, not walkable, but it's a retail use. One little section that that also stands out to me is the part that is kind of next to the Starbucks that goes perpendicular to the dollar store on the other side of the building to the south.
Is a childcare center.
Yeah. Yeah, kind of along there, that's more at a similar scale to what's on center. So I think that I could be fine with this map. I don't know what attachment number it is. I think it's 4.
That's right.
Attachment 4.
Yeah, perhaps. But Councilmember Watton, what are you gonna say?
Yeah, I have a little bit of concern of knowing, first of all, it was the IGA store that was primarily the anchor of that building. But now, as pointed out, we've got 2 childcare centers. Those do not fall under the retail
Correct.
designation. I'd like to see that building pulled out, be designated differently, and maybe it's more similar to the Safeway property, that we can have a better definition around it. The reality is, if we can get some retail, it's better on Center Boulevard, Center Street. I always get the two mixed up. Center Boulevard, and fill that in first. I think that's the bigger challenge, is making sure that there's parking and walkability, which Center Boulevard has, and then those others to me are outliers, including the property like Spring Plaza across the street, where we may have a more broader definition of the appropriate types of businesses in it. Obviously, we don't want like light manufacturing in the IGA building, the former IGA building. That wouldn't make sense, but maybe it's a little more broader definition on the outliers while keeping the core retail emphasis, especially as we have medical facilities there that may end up being retail space later on. So that's my take on that.
I think that I would tend to agree. I think that makes the most sense, that there's more in common between the former IGA building, as everyone called it, and the Safeway than it has in common with Center, even though it is close in proximity. Yeah, I think that the original intended use was effectively that people would drive to the IGA. It wasn't intended to have that area be part of the walkable part of the community. Yeah. Okay, so I think we could just go with the Planning Commission's recommendation then, with just Center Boulevard.
Attachment 3.
Yeah, attachment 3. So I guess that'd be attachments 1 and 3 that we are currently recommending.
Okay. Are there any concerns with any of the code requirements. I don't think we really had any changes in that.
I don't think so. I mean, no matter what you do, there's always going to be problems. And I think
The
that
the only change
Yes.
that we're recommending that's not reflected in the strike through right now is to rename the just kind of code cleanup, really. Renaming the downtown historic district retail overlay zone just to retail use overlay zone, because the actual extent of the overlay zone is different than historic downtown Snoqualmie and the landmark district. And this would just be a change that improves code clarity and makes interpretation easier for the general public. So that's really the only change that we're proposing here. It's not reflected in the strike through, but if you direct staff to, we can prepare the amendments for council with that change included.
I think that would help clear up a lot of stuff too, because there were members of the community that were thinking, well, this is going to ruin the historic nature of downtown and stuff. Well, there's a separate overlay that deals with the historic nature of downtown. And this doesn't affect that those two components of the code don't really talk to each other. This is specifically just about the use of retail and the intended walkability of the retail. So I think that could remove a lot of misconceptions of what we're trying to do if we just labeled it as retail rather than bringing in the fact that it's about the downtown historic overlay, which again is a separate part of the code.
So call both maps retail use overlay zone.
Yeah.
I agree. We're going to have a riveting
Although-
discussion about that at the planning commission meeting tonight.
Oh, good. About the paint colors.
Well, about the downtown, all the different overlays, and the
Oh, okay.
landmark and
Um,
the historic and yeah.
Only concern that I have about calling it retail overlay zone is that technically we're not changing the zoning.
Not a zone.
So it's not
it
a zone.
should just
Why don't
be
you
an
just call it overlay?
overlay.
Yeah.
Zone should come out.
Yeah, which also caused a lot of confusion with the public at the planning commission because people thought that there was a rezoning happen and it isn't a rezone.
Mhm.
Yeah. The buildings that are currently the residences that are on that section of Falls Avenue, I believe are BR2, right? So anyway, that wasn't going to change. It was never going to change, but people
Right.
thought that it was going to because it said zoning right there in the
Yes.
description.
So we'll make a point of that in our next, in that when we complete the agenda bill, we'll make it clear that that's not a zoning change, just an overlay. Okay.
Okay. Other points from staff or questions from the committee, whichever level we are.
Can we move this to consent?
Yeah, this is consent.
This is,
Just jam it through. No, I'm kidding.
The ordinance is-
Probably shouldn't. Yeah, I think it's an ordinance anyway.
is it?
Yeah.
Okay.
No, I think that definitely the public's gonna want to see this in full daylight. So. Yeah, and since it's an ordinance, so won't be on consent.
Okay.
Okay. I think it's on May 12th.
Excellent.
Perfect.
Okay, that takes us to AB 25-036, the resolution amending SR1 mixed-use final plan conditions of approval and development standards. So we didn't technically really get into this much in our last couple of meetings, but this is effectively the thing that makes what we just talked about matter. And if we don't do these things, then why we talk about all this stuff,
So
at least with regard to center.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, so go ahead and lead us off.
okay, thank you,
Development Director.
Commissioner or Councilmember Johnson. So we need to pass the ordinance before we bring the resolution, because the resolution refers to the municipal code in the ordinance, and that needs to be passed before we make the change to the mixed-use final plan. So what I would propose is that we take the ordinance for a first and second reading to the council on May 12th and the 27th, I believe. And then we bring the resolution to the first meeting in June.
I wonder then if we should factor in a way to make sure that the council's aware of that at the meeting on the 12th. Yeah, I think that it would be helpful if the council understood some of that background and why it has to be that way and what our intent is.
I believe we laid that out in the agenda, Bill, but I'll go back and double check.
Okay.
I remember trying to speak to that as I was putting that together, why it was important to get the ordinance passed first and allow the 5 days period before we brought the resolution back.
Okay. Yeah, as long as council's just, as long as that's explained, I think that'll really help. So.
Okay.
What I found is that with this particular process of trying to address these issues, the hardest part has been understanding what it is that we're doing and how it works. Because a lot of people really like the concept and they go, wait, but what is it?
Yeah, I had asked that when I got here because it was confusing to me. Like, why didn't we just do all of this as one?
Right.
You know, but then I learned from talking to the city attorney's office that the ordinance had to come first.
I believe that this has gone through a process through 3 city attorneys so far to get to this point.
Yes.
It's confusing. Okay, thank you. Any questions or comments about this item?
No, I'm
Okay.
good.
Then I'll go ahead and recommend that we take staff's direction, then that this would go into the first council meeting in June. And we'll discuss it further there as needed.
Okay, great. Thank you. Did you have anything to add, Andrew,
I don't.
on this issue? Did we get it right?
To the best of my knowledge.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Okay,
Okay.
then. Thank you very much. That does take us to the end of our agenda. So without objection, we will be adjourned.
Thank you.
Being none, we are adjourned. Thank you all for being here.